could figure this out. So over the course of a couple of years, I worked hard with Scottish Natural Heritage, and this is it actually, and we figured out how we could actually lay out a golf course that did not impact the environmentally sensitive areas of this parcel of land. But what it did do was it created the impetus to protect the land. The golf course, a true Scottish golf course, British Isles golf course, is about the authenticity of the place. That's what makes it special. That's why you don't build it. You have to find a special place to put it. You can't just throw money at it and expect it to be something. It has to find its own place. So we were completely aligned with Scottish Natural Heritage that the reason we wanted to build the golf course or create the golf course was because this place was so special. The challenge was, could we do so and get a win-win out of it? Could we do so and actually protect it long term? And that would be, I would hope, the ambition here. Could a golf course be laid out across this piece of land, protect it forever, give access to many, all, and actually lift its environmental value, not diminish it? And I think if you can do that, you eventually end up with the kind of things you're seeing here. This is Macgranish. And you can see there's very little done to the landscape. The rumpled fairways, this is another project in Wisconsin. We switched to a different one. A quick story about this one. This is actually in central Wisconsin. Would you believe it? Those are sand dunes that were underneath a lake. And the quick backstory on this whole area, thousands of acres, was planted with timber for timber production. And as we know, timber production is not what it was. No one's using paper anymore. And so when we were asked to come in and look at this as a potential golf course site, I spent a lot of time with the ecologists from the region and learned a lot about the ecology. And it turned out that prior to settlement, these were pine oak savannas. And so as we learned about that, we understood that we could actually create the golf course and then re-establish the pine oak savanna over hundreds and hundreds of acres. And now this golf course has become the ground zero for the re-establishment of pine oak savanna through central Wisconsin. So golf gets a very bad rap for being this bright green, intensive, pesticide-fueled, water-guzzling, cart-driving thing. And that's true. I still see that. That's what golf is through a lot of America. Those golf courses aren't doing well. Those, people, when you point at me and say golf participation is down, those are the kinds of golf courses that's happening on. But the golf courses that are authentic, that are have a sense of place, that respect the landscape that they're in, and whether that's Bandon Dunes in Oregon or Gamble Sands that we were lucky enough to do in north central Washington, those golf courses are very, very natural, and they're enjoying huge participation rates. And their impact to their community is well beyond just financial. It draws a huge immense amount of pride to the local people. If you go to Bandon, Oregon, and ask a non-golfer in the town where they're from, I think they'll quickly tell you that they live in the town right next to Bandon Dunes. And that brings a lot of pride to their young folk that now have a lot of jobs that they can do. And it gives me no end of pride that I was part of doing that. And I can see that could happen here. There could be the potential. I don't know if it will be, but it could be. And I, for one, would like to be part of that exploration with you to see if we could make that happen.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, so I'm sure there are some comments that are still out there. So if you want to go ahead and take a few more minutes to write some thoughts down, we as staff we'll read through comments that we've received, and there's some questions on here, and if we can answer those now, we will do so. But we may not be able to answer all of them at this time. So we can take a few more minutes and collect more of these comments.
Got everybody signed up out there?
Anything you want me to make up? Okay. Get all of them back here.
Okay, so where the
Any more?
You got more?
Okay, so you guys can go ahead and keep writing, but I think that we can go ahead and start reading through some of these. I know that Jessica, our environmental program manager, said she has sifted through some of them, particularly on the environmental side, and she said that she can answer several of the questions just by having a quick conversation. So I'm going to have her start off. And continue to feel free to write. Like, this is not your only opportunity to comment. I have business cards at the back. I'm happy to have you email me, call me. This is not your only opportunity this evening. As well as we still have an hour left in the evening. We're going to read through these comments, answer questions if we can, and then at the end, there will be some opportunity for some question and answer. And I'm sure that some of us, I'll be sticking around and some of us will be sticking around. But I also want to make sure that if you need to leave by 8, that we try and get through all of the comments as best we can. So Jessica, I'm going to have you start off.
Awesome, thank you. Who doesn't want to be the person that follows the guy with the fun accent? Right? And when I have to talk about, it's really fun. Mostly, hold it closer.
Yeah, you need to
Is that better?
Yes.
I can shout, I'm pretty loud. I get told that my whole life.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Jessica Logan, in case you weren't here earlier. I'm the Environmental Program Manager for State Parks. And basically what my job entails is I help facilitate all of the environmental reviews that we do throughout the state for projects. Little projects, big projects, projects like this. And it's my job to make sure that the people in our agency who make decisions, the decision makers, are informed about the environmental consequences of those decisions. So I think probably the elephant in the room with this proposal is that there has been a similar one, right? We know that there was a similar golf course proposal on this piece of property once upon a time, and many of you may remember that state parks had concerns about it once upon a time. So how are we here today? Why are we here today? And how are we moving forward with this? Laura did a great job of explaining how we got to this point, how long-range planning, how we used our mission and our agency's vision to get us to a point where we've decided that this piece of property specifically is appropriate for something more than what we typically do at state parks. And we heard a phenomenal concept about what could happen on this landscape, how we could make this something really, really awesome. But how does that actually work out? Like, how do we make the decisions? How do we understand what the impacts are? And how do we use that to shape our decision making, right? There's, I think, sometimes a misconception that once we get a concept and we get this far and there's a public meeting, we've made up our mind. We're just going to do it. And that's not the case. And that's why we're here today. Because there's a lot of things that drive decisions like this. And obviously, public input is a huge one. But another huge one is the environmental considerations. So we have, who here knows what the State Environmental Policy Act is? A few of you? It's riveting. I love talking about it. We won't talk about it too much. But basically, what the State Environmental Policy Act requires us to do as an agency is to take a real close look at environmental impacts for projects like this, which sounds great, but what does that really mean? Well, for starters, what do we have? What do we have with this piece of property? What do we know about this piece of property? Laura went over the size of it and that it came to us in chunks. We know that once upon a time, someone tried to build a golf course on it and that there's some pretty big scars on the landscape. We do know that this entire area is a deflation plain wetland. We know that there is invasive species and native species mixed all over with wetlands on this property. And that's about it. Is that all we're going to know before we make a decision? Absolutely not. Before we make a decision, we will go through a very, very robust environmental review process. And we won't just base the project and the proposal on that information. We'll use that information to shape the project and proposal. I mean, how do we know what the native grasses are? How do we know where hummocks should be and where swales should be without doing some wetland reconnaissance, without doing some topography mapping? We won't. So that kind of work will be done before we can come up with an actual proposal. So part of why I'm sharing this with you is some of the questions I'm seeing consistently coming through is, what does this proposal look like? How many I'm not a golfer, sorry guys. Pathways. Yeah, sorry. How many pathways will be, how many courses, how many acres will it take up? There's a lot of questions about specifics that we got from you guys, and those are phenomenal questions. Absolutely, we need to know the answers to those questions, but not yet. Not until we understand more what the landscape looks like and what we can do with it. Now, does that mean that if there are any environmental impacts, state parks is like, we're tapping out of this? I can't answer that at this point. State parks, our mission is to balance recreation with environmental protection, right? That's what we do. We provide beautiful places for the public to come and recreate. It is why we have a board of commissioners who make really tough decisions on finding that balance. But they can't make those decisions unless we provide them that information. So the next part of this process, if we're to move forward, we'll be doing that background, doing the deep dive to figure out what we have, what we know, what we don't know, what we need to know, before we can start shaping what this proposal could possibly look like. And along the way, there will be more opportunities for the public to weigh in. This won't be the last time you hear from us, and I'm sure Laura will go over that more. But I wanted to start there because that is a good chunk of what these questions are, and I don't want you to think we're not answering your questions. But we simply don't know yet. But we will know. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. Next. Pardon me. We don't. Well, why don't we start reading through and we'll see what we have. So,
We can go ahead and start reading through. Do you have a stack of other, or is it just mixed in?
They're all mixed.
Okay. Tremendous opportunity for economic development and local jobs. Are these played year-round? Timing? Question mark.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about Westport. Westport exhibits a lot of the same weather qualities that you see at some of the finest traditional links, including St. Andrews. Actually, when I looked at the weather reports, St. Andrews and Westport get almost the identical amount of rain a year, and they play golf 365 days, well, minus Sundays, all year round. So I'm not quick with math on my feet.
What's the elevation of St. Andrews?
Sea level,
It is?
yes.
A few feet above.
It's just a few feet above, sorry. I mean, it's very similar, and that's one of the draws. And when I was detailing, looking at this unique piece of land, I just couldn't get out of my head how similar it was to St. Andrews in particular.
Wasn't St. Andrews the beginning of golf?
Yeah, that's when golf started. Well, arguably, Prestwick and St. Andrews. Yeah.
Repeat the question.
Oh, the question was the home of golf, where golf was created in the 14th century?
Yeah.
Yes, that St. Andrews is where it started.
Okay, proposal is a win-win for everyone. Opportunity like this only comes along once in a lifetime. Enthusiastically support Westport Golf Links.
A great idea. If you build it, people will come. Much needed in Westport.
Will the locals get a break on green fees?
Of course. Quick answer. We've worked with the Parks Department to figure out a tiered rate system so that the locals definitely get a break and are encouraged. That's part of the central idea of a links course, is having community ownership. So there will be a strong desire to have a lower rate for locals.
Will I still be able to use the path for walks, bike rides, at any time with the golf course open to the public? What, if any, what impact on the surfing community for access, etc.? What is the timeline for a finished golf course? I'm for the golf. Whatever happens, can we please get a swimming pool for the kids? I feel like I just wandered into something there. To learn water safety, especially and ocean community. A nice trade-off, perhaps. A nice swimming pool. So the master planning process would be part of the timeline. That would depend on many, many factors, including whether or not we move forward with this at all, this consideration, this concept. It would depend on the environmental review and commission decision to move forward on a master plan. You want to add to that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why we're here today. That's why we're here today. And I'm Peter Zog. I'm Assistant Director with State Parks. And so I will read some of these things, but I think that's the intent here, is that we didn't want to just come and do a full-fledged master planning process for what we're talking about here today and then spring it on you and say, hey, how do you like it? But we really are talking about making this participatory. And so we really want to know ahead of time whether we're going downstream or upstream or crossways, or how this is actually good to go. Because our executive leadership needs to understand whether or not this is a good idea to put some resources into this and move forward to the next step. So the outcome of tonight, and if we have another meeting, and the correspondence we receive will be a recommendation to the director to move to the next step only. So that's all we're deciding here tonight. We're thinking about tonight is, do we move on to the next step?
And as far as like specific impacts to surfing or any sort of current recreation, that's actually something that gets considered during an environmental review process. It's something that we would do a bit of a deep dive on. So you're probably going to hear me say this a lot. We don't know yet, but we'll find out.
What can you do to entertain kids? How do you plan to find staff? How much will a round cost? Senior discount? kids to work courses. What opportunities, things are available to do in winter?
I'll try and make it as brief. Well, first, there's programs called First Tee programs, which is a great junior program. As far as employment, if you look at Bandon Dunes, the caddy program employs well over 100 caddies. 500 caddies. So there's a tremendous job opportunity, not to mention on the property itself, there's got to be at least 40 or 50 direct jobs, not to mention ancillary jobs throughout the town with hotel, lodging, restaurant, that sort of thing.
Has the developer and Westport Golf made a plan for extra sewer use and the impact to our current system? Where's Kevin?
So yes, the answer is we've had some great conversations. We were lucky to meet with the developer group early on just to start throwing ideas around, and obviously want to make sure we can supply the right infrastructure for the project or for any project in the park really. Whether it's a golf course or whatever State Parks does, we want to make sure we can handle sewage and provide water and possibly some irrigation for, I mean, you could build a nice park over there and still need irrigation, right? So one of the great things that's come out of this is not only can we take the sewer capacity at our plant over here, and because of the location of Lighthouse State Park, that's pretty easy for us to convey it to the sewer treatment plant. But one of the things that we've been talking about is taking our effluent from the plant, turning it around, treating it, and using that reuse water for irrigation water. So less impact on our water supply and our aquifer, and plus once we treat that effluent, it does nice things at the course, it perks back down, that helps keep our aquifers full. So this cycle of that is very exciting to me as your public works director. It's in our comprehensive plan for our sewer department, and there may be some funding out there to help something like that happen. So long answer to the question is yes, we've talked about it, and yes, we have the capacity to handle that.
Okay, will there be a bar? What kind of chemicals are used in the fertilizers? Will the golf balls wind up in the ocean? Is Chuck Maples involved?
Yes, there will be a bar. Well, if we're allowed to put one there, I'm sure we'll be able to work through that. I can't speak to the chemicals yet because we don't know what we're going to be able to build.
Talking about Bandon Dunes, when Bandon was built, the cranberry bogs were a big concern, and the quality of the water. So there was a lot of work done to make sure that the water that was drawn from the aquifers and whatever inputs were put in, fertilizers, pesticides and such, didn't end up back in the cranberry bogs. So a number of testing wells were put out, and a baseline was set before the golf course was ever built. And over the 5 years that those baselines were tested, the water got cleaner.
I don't think the golf course will be close enough to the ocean to actually hit a ball that far. But I can't speak to everyone's skill level. But I'm pretty sure that won't happen. I can't make any promises. Is Chuck Maples involved? No, he is not involved. I have never met Chuck Maples.
How does having a partnership with a golf course align with the state park's mission? Water source for greens, we kind of covered that one. Are the fertilizers eco-friendly? We covered that one. No more short-term rentals. We already have a shortage of full-time rentals available. Mission?
She gives me the easy ones. The alignment with the mission is a complex one. I think in the end, that's going to be a decision from our commission to understand whether or not that it does align with our mission. But I think one of the things that we learned through the Great Recession was that we needed to look outward as an agency and make friends with the places that we have parks in. And so the idea of developing partnerships with local government to provide for recreation and some local amenity in concert with state park amenities is something that our commission has been broadly supportive of. Partnerships are the wave of the future, and it's really now as the financial challenges mount, it really is one of the only ways that we can succeed as a state parks entity. So really the alignment is about recreation, it's about natural resource protection, and it's about people having a naturalistic experience in a beautiful place, and that aligns very well with the state parks mission as we see it. But part of this process is to understand how good of an overlap that really is.
Do you want to read any that you're holding?
Sure. Need to know how this will affect long-term residences. And some of these are the SEPA-related questions that we're going to be hearing about and analyzing in the SEPA environmental analysis process. Traffic study, analysis of infrastructure, road work, new egress issues, traffic lights added. So all a matter of design elements and also understanding the impacts that this would have on the local community and putting together plans that would help address and mitigate those impacts. What happens to Westport if the Links proposal doesn't move forward? That's another good question. So right now we're considering this place, the Westport Light State Park, as a potential new state park development as part of our major capital development for state parks. So it's not as though that we would just pull the plug and desert this place if this doesn't go forward, but then it would have to go on to another track and see if this would be another place that we'd want to develop in the future. So when that would happen, I don't know. We're in a decision-making process about new parks currently, and so there's a possibility that this park could become something else, but right now, we're considering this proposal. Please know location of golf course on property. And so I think that's one of the critical things is that we don't really know where the golf course is going to be on the property. And the idea is that it's seamlessly integrated into the entire park. And so it's not necessarily it's going to be in a specific corner of the park, but it would be integrated throughout. Please ask for a show of hands near the end of the presentation how many are in favor and how much of the golf proposal. So we can do that. How has golf at Bandon Dunes benefited the city of Bandon, Oregon? I support the course 100%.
Well, Bandon Dunes now has 5 golf courses as of next year. I think they have in the region of 700 full-time staff, 500 caddies. The multiplier's at least 3 to 1, so there's 3 more employees outside of the gates, so that takes you to maybe another 3,000 people that are making their living out of it. A point I wanted to touch on, there's something called the Evans Scholarship, which is awarded to caddies. Bandon Dunes has the greatest number of Evans Scholars in the United States. That's local kids that are now going to college on a full ride. So I'm very pleased about being part of that. And obviously the type of golf course we're looking at here, we'd be looking at those kids being caddies, so they'd be open to that program.
That's a good segue into this comment. We need this type of recreation in Westport. It is for all ages and economic levels. This course can provide recreation for youth. Economic. Great idea having Scottish Link course. Hope it gets done.
To whoever wrote this comment, I appreciate your handwriting. Westport and surrounding communities is in desperate need of organized youth activities. Year-round, our low-income community lacks opportunities for youth to continue learning during out-of-school time, afternoons, and summers. Conversely, visitors from middle-class backgrounds bring families to vacation and summer that would search and participate in educational activities about the local natural resources. The last 20 years, youth activities during out-of-school time have grown exponentially, providing opportunities for youth to pursue individually as a career development pathway, yet not in the Grays Harbor area. A community center centered to where youth environmental education partnerships could include the city, the school district, Parks and Rec, the museum system, tourism, YMCA, Boys and Girls Clubs, and more. Education is key to future skill development and sustainability. Westport needs hope and future youth and education.
Okay, here's a question for Jessica. Environmental. How does a links course affect the current environment at the site? Support the course for 100%.
So the EIS process, the deep dive on baseline information that we talked about will be what we use to develop the actual proposal. After the proposal is developed, we then take that proposal and we run that through an environmental review where we look at a series of potential environmental impacts and we determine whether or not the proposal will have any potential impacts and whether or not those impacts could be mitigated or offset. If they cannot, then we would be required to do an environmental impact statement where we kind of do a deep dive on what those impacts are and what they mean. That is the information that the commission would ultimately be making a decision on. That was like the 22nd version of what EIS is. So, okay.
How are people supposed to make a decision on how this project will impact the community when there is no defined plan? So Jessica just spoke to that. There will be opportunity to talk further once the plan is developed. We need the economic push from a large project such as this. Please do not let the environmentalists or NGOs stop this project.
As a personal tree hugger, I take exception to that, but okay. Golf courses, enhance community, generate revenue, direct and indirect, positive growth in visitor demographics, new accommodations while supporting growth for existing businesses.
How will the wetlands be protected now and in the future?
So wetlands are protected a number of different ways. They're protected by state law, they're protected by federal law, and actually State Parks has natural resource policy that provides additional protection to them. So there's a lot of different ways that wetlands are protected, but before we can protect them, we need to know where they are and we need to know what their health is. So that's the first step.
Other infrastructure, water sources, and treatment. I think Kevin hit on that. And I'm going to move on to another one. What existing course would most typify the Westport vision? How many winter months will the course be accessible? Will runners be allowed on the paths associated with the course? And what does the community need to prioritize in order to get a commitment from Westport Golf LLC?
Let me read that again. I have my glasses. Sorry. Well, we already mentioned St. Andrews, and I couldn't think of a better example because it's such a public center for that town, and the town identifies itself. And the golf course is seaside, basically at sea level. And there's the topography is very similar to what you see here as a comparison. And it's easy, look up St. Andrews online, you can get all sorts of pictures. Winter months, like we said, this is going to be year round. In fact, golfers of this ilk love playing in the rain and driving wind, which we get a little bit of that. Of course, runners will be allowed. In fact, that's part of the experience. We want the public to be, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Chambers Bay, but there are trails that run through that also. And as David mentioned earlier, St. Andrews has all sorts of walkways and trails. So that's not only encouraged, it's fundamental. What was the last one? What does the community need to do in order to get a commitment?
Prioritize in order to get a commitment.
We're doing it. We're working with the city council and the mayor and the parks department, and like we said, we're going to let the information and what we learn about the environment help drive our decision.
Very supportive of this golf course. Also would like to see remaining land be focused on providing activities, opportunities for our communities, kids, and families. Pool, skate park, bike park, etc.
Okay, what about coastal erosion, global warming, and sea level rise?
Oh, just those things, right. Actually, State Parks is currently working on our climate change adaptation plan. It's something that we take very seriously, and it's something that our commission has directed us to consider in all projects moving forward. So it's absolutely something that would be considered during part of the environmental review process once we have an actual proposal in hand.
Improvement on tsunami impact on community evacuation. I'm not sure we have an answer to that. It potentially could be addressed in the master plan. That was part of discussions with the city as well. So I don't know where oh, there's Kevin. You're hiding. So that was part of some of the conversations that we've had with the city. So we could certainly be looking at potential opportunities in the master planning process.
Public land, concern of concentrating, I'm a tree hugger, not a reader. Usage focus of park for a small and more or less elite segment of park users. What really is a golf course bringing to the community of Westport? Environment, this is an environment one. Is a golf course the best use of public land? Well, that's what this entire process is supposed to help us find out. Is this what the best use of this public land is for the public in perpetuity? Like, this would be State Parks facility at the end of the day, and we manage our lands for the public. And so we take this very seriously. That's why you're all here. And that's what this is the very, very, very beginning of that process to answer that question.
How will the state park protect the native shore pine forest, and how many acres of forest will be removed? And I think that's another question for the planning process. And as we go through that, if we think about what a master plan process looks like, so if we move to the next step now, what we'd be doing is working with Westport Golf LLC to develop a master plan. And for us in state parks, that's a multi-phased public process where we're involving the public in every step of the way. We understand what the issues are, we look at alternatives, and then we develop recommendations and final recommendations and bring them to the State Parks and Recreation Commission for approval. So there's a serious public element in the design and or planning of a state park. So we just want to assure you that we don't know some of the answers to these questions today, but you will be involved if you want in the planning of the park soup to nuts. Recreation, open space necessary for human life and health. Agree. Overdevelopment, crowded, loss of small town feel, bird watching, important to something to our country. Animals need habitat. Recreational, what is the future of golf courses? Too expensive, younger generation not golfing, competing golf courses in Aberdeen and elsewhere. What is the demand and market? So I think we've talked about that more or less, so keep on going on that. Recreation, golf course as proposed with other park amenities is good for every user. Will park be year-round? Talked about that. The park, of course, would be year-round, and golf as year-round as it can be. Recreation, there appears to be enough acreage for 2 or possibly 3 courses. Is this the long-term plan, Bandon Dunes style? Yeah.
No, the short answer is no. There's desire to put an 18-hole golf course, a small inn. We haven't determined the size, but it's modest. Driving range and potentially a putting course or a short course, but one 18-hole golf course only, and the topography is going to speak to that.
Other taxes, absolutely not interested in a tax abatement situation. How will this impact local taxes?
More revenue?
How will this impact local taxes? Do we have an answer?
We don't have an answer.
But we don't have an answer to that.
I don't believe it's going to impact local taxes.
Well,
So, hold on. I'm gonna come over here.
Right now, the property is not being taxed, okay? Improvements aren't necessarily taxed except for physical improvements and those who would have a leasehold tax attached to them. The other taxes that would be included in this would be increased sales tax and use tax that were provided from income opportunities from the golf course or anything else the master plan developed. So again, Parks would own the land. If they lease, if I understand this correctly, if you authorize someone to build something on that, that creates a leasehold situation with leasehold improvement taxes. So there is a possibility for some property tax revenue to come in that way.
The economic impact, we've estimated it being roughly, and we're doing this based on 25,000 rounds a year, which we think is conservative, is it's estimated to be roughly $30 million of economic impact. Well, if you extrapolate tax income from that, we estimated that to Westport, and Mayor, we had this discussion, Westport itself could bring in, just from extra sales taxes, up to $1 million additional a year.
Okay, other, infrastructure, roads, and access. What is the impact on the city, fire protection, police? Do we want to address that? Or is that something you can, we'll analyze that in the SEPA process. Recreation, access to state park trails. We talked about that. Other, 40-room units. What does that mean for local motels and short-term rentals?
So we purposely have made the inn modest. We're talking about 25, 30,000 unique visitors coming to Westport a year. 40 rooms isn't enough for them. Our idea is that we become somewhat of a hub when people are making reservations. The opportunity is, hey, would you like to stay at the inn? Or can we book one of the local bed and breakfasts for you? We also have lodging at other locations. So it's purposely small.
65-year Grayland property owner. I 100% support an environmentally designed and operated golf course.
What is planned for the youth of the area and visitors? I think we covered that, and that could also be addressed in the master planning process. Recreation, instead of a golf course, which does not appear to match Parks' mission statement, I would like to see the camping area expanded as well as more facilities that will appeal to the majority of people. The majority of people come here to experience the ocean, not golf. Do you see the golf course open year-round? Yep. How much land is needed for a golf course? Is your proposal for the golf course on the 35 and 37 acre sites on more through dunes? Or more through dunes, I'm sorry. So is your proposal for the golf course on the 35 and 37 acre sites or more through dunes? So it would likely meander throughout the entire site. It's not just the 37 acres that was designated as the RCA. Do you see the golf course open year-round? That was addressed earlier.
Golf course opportunity for young men and women of middle school, high school age to experience golf through their school experience. It seems very unwise to even propose this golf course without an accurate wetland delineation performed by a certified wetland professional. Absolutely. The shore pine is considered to be a conservation concern in Washington. Can't you find a more appropriate site? We'll find out.
Community ownership, is this a shared cost and private project situation? I think as we've conceived this, at least at the moment, this is something where Westport Golf LLC would be essentially footing the bill for the development of the golf course in addition to the master planning process. And then how we would share costs for the more community type amenities, state park amenities that could complement this, that would just have to be determined at that time. How will the non-golfing citizen, how will the non-golfing citizen be able to use our parkland? And I think that's the intent here, is that integrated throughout the entire park as much as absolutely possible. How will recreation, would trails be incorporated into the golf course area, support the course 100%? Yes. Golf course, what is projected time frame on process? Okay, so that's now a good question. So, yeah, so for our part of the process right now, in order to go to the next step, we would begin a master plan process, and that is a community involvement process which could take upwards of 9, 10, 11 months to do and get through the environmental impact statement process. And then there'd be a decision by the commission to approve or not approve or adjust the development. And then from there, then we'd work into the financial arrangement with the Golf LLC. And then from there, it would go into design and construction. So we're talking about 3-4 years out. So these things don't move quickly. So in case you were worried that this was going to happen tomorrow, you can relax. Let's see, golf course. Is there a golf clubhouse in planning? Will it be 9 or 18 hole course? Okay, keep on going then. Sorry, I will get through this. It's important for us to do all of these. Will the citizens of Westport something at receive a discount for membership?